As 2026 unfolds, the world finds itself standing at one of the most dangerous crossroads in modern history. Global peace, once considered a fragile but achievable goal, now appears increasingly distant. Rising tensions between the United States, Russia, and China have pushed international relations into an era defined by suspicion, military readiness, and strategic confrontation. Daily headlines filled with warnings, intelligence reports, and military movements suggest that the possibility of a global conflict is no longer theoretical but alarmingly real. The United States enters 2026 determined to preserve its global dominance amid what it views as growing challenges from rival powers. Washington has expanded its military presence across Europe, the Indo-Pacific, and the Middle East, reinforcing alliances and increasing joint military exercises at an unprecedented scale. American officials insist these actions are defensive, aimed at protecting allies and maintaining global stability. However, Moscow and Beijing interpret these moves as aggressive attempts to encircle and weaken them strategically. Advanced missile defense systems, next-generation fighter jets, space-based surveillance platforms, and artificial intelligence-driven warfare technologies have been fully activated by the United States. The Pentagon has openly acknowledged that future wars will not be limited to land, sea, and air, but will also extend into space and cyberspace. This shift signals a clear message: America is preparing for conflicts that may redefine the nature of warfare itself. Russia, meanwhile, has adopted a firm and confrontational stance. Already strained relations with the West have worsened as Moscow accuses NATO and the United States of violating security agreements and threatening Russian sovereignty. In response, Russia has increased military deployments across Eastern Europe, the Arctic, and key maritime routes. Naval patrols and strategic bomber flights have become more frequent, raising concerns among European nations about potential escalation. The Russian leadership has repeatedly emphasized its nuclear deterrence capabilities, reminding the world that Russia remains one of the most heavily armed nuclear powers. Statements from the Kremlin suggest that any direct threat to Russian territorial influence will be met with overwhelming force. This rhetoric, combined with visible military mobilization, has intensified fears of miscalculation, where a single incident could spiral into a much larger conflict. China stands as the third and perhaps most complex pillar of this global tension. By 2026, China is no longer seen solely as an economic powerhouse, but as a comprehensive military force capable of challenging American influence on a global scale. The South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait have emerged as the most volatile flashpoints. Chinese naval and air force activities in these regions have increased significantly, prompting strong reactions from the United States and its regional allies. Beijing maintains that Taiwan is an internal matter and a core national interest that cannot be compromised. However, continued American support for Taiwan's defense has drawn sharp warnings from Chinese officials. Analysts widely believe that any direct confrontation over Taiwan could rapidly escalate, pulling multiple nations into a wider conflict with global consequences. Beyond conventional military power, 2026 has marked a dramatic rise in cyber warfare and information conflict. The United States, Russia, and China have all accused each other of large-scale cyber attacks targeting critical infrastructure. Power grids, financial systems, satellite communications, and even healthcare networks have reportedly been disrupted. These attacks, often difficult to trace conclusively, represent a new battlefield where nations can inflict massive damage without firing a single missile. Information warfare has also intensified. Disinformation campaigns, digital propaganda, and psychological operations are being used to influence public opinion, destabilize societies, and weaken trust in institutions. Experts warn that modern wars may begin long before the first shot is fired, unfolding silently through screens, servers, and social media platforms. The Middle East remains deeply entangled in this global struggle. Long-standing conflicts, regional rivalries, and proxy wars continue to draw in major powers. The United States and Russia both maintain strategic interests in the region, while China has steadily expanded its economic and diplomatic footprint. Any escalation in the Middle East has the potential to trigger broader confrontations, especially if major powers find themselves backing opposing sides. Europe, once hopeful that large-scale war was a thing of the past, now faces renewed uncertainty. NATO countries have increased defense spending and troop readiness, citing concerns over Russian military activity. Eastern European nations, in particular, fear becoming the front line of a potential confrontation between NATO and Russia. Diplomatic efforts continue, but trust between opposing sides remains dangerously low. Economic consequences of these tensions are already being felt worldwide. Global markets have become increasingly volatile as investors react to uncertainty and risk. Energy prices fluctuate amid fears of supply disruptions, while international trade faces new barriers driven by sanctions and strategic decoupling. Developing nations, often caught between competing powers, struggle to maintain economic stability as global systems become more fragmented. The United Nations and other international organizations have called for restraint and dialogue, warning that a global war would result in catastrophic humanitarian consequences. Despite these appeals, diplomatic negotiations often stall amid mutual accusations and conflicting strategic interests. The balance between deterrence and provocation grows thinner with each passing month. Military experts caution that the greatest danger lies not in deliberate war planning, but in accidental escalation. A misinterpreted military exercise, an unintended cyber attack, or a regional clash could rapidly draw major powers into direct confrontation. In a world where response times are measured in minutes and decisions are influenced by automated systems, the margin for error has never been smaller. As 2026 progresses, ordinary citizens across the globe watch these developments with growing concern. The idea of a global war is no longer confined to history books or distant memories. It is a looming possibility discussed in newsrooms, government offices, and households alike. People question whether diplomacy can still prevail or whether the world is drifting toward a conflict that could reshape civilization itself. Despite the tension, some analysts remain cautiously hopeful. They argue that the very scale of potential destruction acts as a deterrent, forcing leaders to reconsider reckless actions. Back-channel diplomacy, economic interdependence, and public pressure may yet prevent the worst outcomes. History has shown that even during the darkest moments of rivalry, dialogue can still open doors to de-escalation. However, hope alone may not be enough. The global order is undergoing a profound transformation, with power shifting, alliances evolving, and technology redefining warfare. The decisions made in 2026 by the United States, Russia, China, and their allies will likely shape the course of the world for decades to come. The world now waits, watching closely as superpowers maneuver on a global chessboard where every move carries immense risk. Whether this period will be remembered as the brink of a devastating global war or as a moment when humanity stepped back from the edge remains uncertain. What is clear is that the stakes have never been higher, and the future of global peace hangs in a delicate and fragile balance.